Hey, Charlotte.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you
Okay.
fine. It technically is broadcasting because I can't let it, nobody gets in until it is broadcast. So speak softly.
Okay, I'll just mute myself now.
Hey, Bill.
I'm here.
Hey, I was just sending you a text. I mean, we're recording, but I'm having a minor issue in that when I load the wait, am I when I load this, it's not giving me the toolbar.
Which toolbar?
The the green one that's on the top of that has participants question error answer and all of that. Are you able
Oh,
to you're able to see that, right?
yeah. And Charlotte's on now too, I see.
Yes.
Yeah.
Hello.
Hey, Charlotte.
Yeah, I don't know why it's doing that. It wasn't doing that earlier this morning, but
Well, the bar is hiding. I see it on my screen.
yeah, no, when I put it up, when I load, like it's there now, but once I do the share, right? You can see that, right?
Yep. The first slide.
Yeah. And it's disappeared. I don't understand.
You click up there. I have it on the bottom of my screen.
This is what's happening when I So I'm gonna be flying blind on that. So
Well, I can just text you if there's anything that comes up on the.
yep,
You can basically say put it in the chat or the Q&A, whatever you like to do with.
right, exactly. I mean, I'll mention that, and then if there's something that comes up, and feel free to just chime in and offer the question. I'll just mention you may pop in from time to time.
Charlotte, can you see the private chat I just sent to you?
Um, yeah, howdy.
Okay, I just sent one to you, Tom, too, privately. So, but we can connect all
Yeah, I don't.
panelists. So we're all. Do you see the chat at all, Tom?
No, it's this is the only thing I have is it's the PowerPoint.
Okay.
It just says to Bill if I want to respond.
Yeah, be careful on the response because the default on that is sometimes confusing for the last person, or if you send something to all panelists and attendees.
Oh, yeah, I see. Okay.
But I won't use that if Tom doesn't see it. Well, I'll use it for you if you want me to. If there's anything that comes up, usually there's nothing else that comes up. Some people have questions.
Would texting be easier? Because I could just give you my cell.
Yeah, why don't we do that? I can set. I'll add in Tom. Okay, what's your number?
Mine is 224-436-2983.
I'm gonna try to join on my phone, and then we got to go radio silent. And
Yeah, nobody else is on yet. Did you get the text, both of you, I just sent?
yes,
Charlotte, you got that?
Yes.
Oh, good. Okay. So I'll just text on there if there's any concerns or questions. Oh, here we have somebody on now. So we're public. Oh no, that's you, Tom, as an attendee.
yeah, no, I'm trying to. come in on this way, but it's, oh no, okay, I've got it. Okay.
Lovely technology. Have you used Zoom before, Charlotte?
Yeah, we use it at Audubon.
Okay. I was telling Tom this morning, my IT guy told me yesterday afternoon that there's a major snafu with Zoom and people need to download some patch for security purposes. So you might want to spread that around internally.
Oh yeah, that's good to know.
The other thing to note too, Charlotte, is that we don't always get a lot of people in July. In fact, it might be really small number, who knows today, but it's recorded and it's PDF later. So a lot of people go on and see the recording or the PDF later.
Okay.
So don't be concerned about the attendees numbers. Usually we have a couple dozen on there, but I don't know what to expect today.
Okay.
So I can look at the chat and the Q&A on my phone. But that's an inefficient way to do it. So I'm going to go silent for a few minutes.
Yep, we have an attendee on.
Okay. And we'll get welcome. We'll get started in a few minutes. Bill, just let me know when, well, I'll come on right at 1 o'clock and we'll get going around then.
Yeah, give it a few minutes probably.
Yep.
Sounds good.
Hello and good afternoon, good morning to everyone. This is Tom Adams. We're going to wait another minute or so before we get started to let people on, give a chance to get on. So we will be back shortly and get started. Thanks again. Okay, we'll get started. Thank you again, everyone, for joining us. I'm Tom Adams. I'm a strategic advisor with the Ocean Project. And in a little bit, Charlotte Runzel, who is a policy analyst with National Audubon Society, will also be on. And on occasion, Bill Mott, the executive director of the Ocean Project, may chime in with questions or comments that you all have. Speaking of which, there's a toolbar on the top or bottom of your screen, somewhere on your screen, which allows you to ask questions or create a chat, which we will answer or attempt to work into the discussion here. Please feel free to use it as often as appropriate. Understanding we got a little late of a start, we still expect to be done by 1:30, no later than 1:30. So let's get started. The first thing I should do, though, is thank the Gordon and Betty Moore Foundation for funding this project and making this whole series of webinars possible. We are delighted that this is now the 11th webinar we've done in a little more than a year, and we will be doing them monthly for the rest of the year, and our next one will be on August 2nd, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. So this is what we're going to cover today. We'll go over days and events that are on the calendar that may be of interest to zoo and aquarium professionals. I will do a very quick update on what's happening in Congress and just as quick of an update on federal fisheries law. At that point, Charlotte will take over and talk about the Forage Fish Conservation Act, and then I'll come back and finish up a little bit with tactics and guidance on messages that and being a messenger, effective messenger on this issue and how you can be helpful. It'll be more coherent when I get to that point. So the couple things to point out, the main two are AZA related to its conference. Our next webinar, like I said, will be on August 2nd. There is a series of visitor engagement tactics and strategies sessions and workshops at AZA, and that'll be on the next slide. I'll go over it just a little bit. We're going to preview those with the folks who are organizing them. Again, that'll be on August 2nd at 1 o'clock Eastern. The other thing is, if you are interested in trying to build a relationship with your member of Congress, this is the perfect time to invite them to tour your facility in August. They are generally home almost the entire time and looking for things to do on their schedule. It's a great way to do an informal VIP tour. They can bring their family. It's a memorable thing. And when I used to do them for Brookfield Zoo, politicians would always get a picture of themselves having fun at the zoo that would, the goal was to hang it up in their office so they remembered you. So it's a great way to cultivate your members. And then, of course, there's the AZA conference in New Orleans in September. Let's hope they stay afloat this weekend. So this is the long list, and you can see it's from start to finish, and I think this is great. There's something pretty much every day there. The one thing I want to highlight is the very first thing up there, which is Advocacy Skills Boot Camp workshop that we are, the Ocean Project is in conjunction with the leadership of AZA's Government Affairs Committee is pulling together right now. So if you're interested in really upping your game and learning more about how to do this stuff, I really encourage you to attend, or if someone at if your institution wants to get more engaged, to send somebody there. It is not going to be, I promise you, a endless panel of talking heads talking about process. It's going to be very interactive, a lot of breakout sessions, and learn by doing. So hopefully you all, we can get some more folks to come. We're really looking forward to it. And there's a social hour afterwards, most importantly. So again, join us on August 2nd, and we'll go over the remaining sessions in a little greater detail. So moving into this is the congressional update portion of the webinar. The two pictures, those really are members of Congress. They're both members of the Judiciary Committee, and this is what they seemingly have been up to this year. So they're clowns from the left and jokers from the right. Anyways, long and short of it, if you're hearing about a major issue that presidential candidates are talking about, that the president is going back and forth with them on, immigration being a perfect example, it is not going to happen between now and the end of this Congress, which will adjourn around shortly before the election in 2020. My rule of thumb is if you turn on cable news and they're talking about it, it is unlikely to pass. But what is likely to pass are the funding bills, the appropriations bills that fund the government. Both the House and Senate committees are actively working on their bills. The House has begun passing them. The Senate is not far behind. The appropriators are really trying to get politics out of the process. They should be commended. But there is a threat of a government shutdown because there's always deadlines that seemingly are missed. And I think if there's anything you can say about this president, is he loves the drama and the buildup to these deadlines. And the threat of a government shutdown just adds to that drama. So I wouldn't be surprised if there's talk about it. Whether or not it happens again, it's hard to say right now. But what can happen in this environment are what I call under the radar issues, and something that really maybe aren't major structural changes to society or government programs, but they can make a huge difference. And fisheries management is one of those issues that looks like it's falling into this category. There's going to be discussion about it, and it's going to be both large scale on the Magnuson-Stevens Act, as it's known, which is the major law that governs fisheries policy. In its evolution, it was first passed in 1976. In its evolution, it has moved more towards science-based management to conserve populations and make them sustainable. And it's a good approach, and we're hoping it continues to move in that direction. As such, the chairman of the House subcommittee this week announced that he's going to do a national listening tour beginning in the fall to try to, incorporate as much feedback from the public as he can as he's drafting a bill that he'll introduce and intends to move through his subcommittee and committee next year. One thing I'll add is when you do these listening sessions, they're always looking for venues. So if you are interested in possibly hosting one of these, feel free to reach out to me or to Bill afterwards, and we can talk, have a conversation and maybe connect you to the committee staff. Because if you're in a location they're interested in, it makes it that much easier. The other thing that happened this week is Don Young, who is the longest serving House member, he's a Republican from Alaska, has reintroduced his version of the Magnuson-Stevens Act. It moves away from these principles. It was introduced last year, or considered a little bit last year in Congress, and we were encouraging folks to oppose it and express concerns to not move away from that policy. Interestingly enough, he does have an original Democratic co-sponsor who's a freshman congressman from New Jersey, so he's got a little bit of bipartisan traction on that. So to go into a little more detail on these issues, I'm going to turn it over to Charlotte. I will say, as a disclaimer, I am a former Audubon employee. I'm a big fan of the organization, and I think they do great work. And I can't think of any better organization to talk to you about the forage fish issue and how it ties into the broader fisheries management issue. So Charlotte, over to you. Just let me know when you want me to flip the slides for you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Hi, everybody. Again, I'm Charlotte Runzel. I'm a policy analyst at the National Audubon Society, and I mostly focus on marine conservation and coastal restoration. So I will do a deeper dive into the fisheries management and how it relates to seabirds today. Next slide, please. Thank you. So again, just a quick overview of the National Audubon Society. Many of you may be familiar because you've worked with someone at Audubon or your parents got the Audubon magazine, but we've been around for a really long time, since the late 1800s. A group of women tried to save birds from being killed for their feathers during the plume trade, and since then, really expanded. So now we consider ourselves local everywhere because we have Audubon members in every single district of the country. And that spans from folks doing restoration work on the ground, doing education work, advocacy, doing native plants in their communities. So we have a lot of different programs, but I will focus a little bit more on the Coast program, which has 4 strategic areas, and we are working to save seabirds and shorebirds from all of the various threats that affect them. So just a quick overview. We have a marine conservation program, so that's promoting seabird health through federal fisheries policy and marine protected areas. A coastal resilience area where we are protecting the places birds need on the coast through habitat restoration and policy changes. Another one is the Gulf of Mexico restoration work. We're working to facilitate money from oil spills to focus that on habitat restoration around the Gulf of Mexico. And then lastly, we have coastal stewardship, where we have volunteers across the country that protect nesting areas for shore nesting birds. Next slide, please. And I'll go over this one pretty quickly because I think a lot of the folks on the phone already know what the Magnuson-Stevens Act is, but it's the only law that governs management of U.S. fish in federal waters. So that's 3 to 200 nautical miles out. We consider it a cornerstone of environmental law that has improved the health of fish populations and ocean ecosystems since it was enacted in 1976. And we really like to celebrate its successes. So over its lifetime, the MSA has rebuilt over 40 populations of overfished species, ensured that overfishing is at an all-time low, and helped the U.S. emerge as a world leader in fisheries management. And the last reauthorization was in 2007. So folks are obviously working to reauthorize that, from Representative Huffman to Representative Young. And currently, the law actually doesn't include forage fish into its framework. So the way we tie seabirds into fisheries management is through forage fish. They are small schooling fish like anchovies and sardines that are mostly inedible to humans, but seabirds rely on them for most of their diet. On the photo here, we have an Atlantic puffin eating sand lance off of the coast of Maine. So we really like to connect our Audubon members and folks, especially on the call, who are wildlife lovers or work with wildlife, to fisheries management through forage fish, because they're really important. Next slide, please. So forage fish, in addition to seabirds, also feed larger fish like tuna that are recreationally and commercially important, as well as marine mammals. And you can see a lot of these animals that rely on forage fish in zoos and aquariums. And like I said, right now the MSA doesn't define forage fish or account for the fact that forage fish fuel the entire ecosystem. So the Forage Fish Conservation Act is actually trying to amend the MSA to include the needs of predators like seabirds and other marine wildlife into its framework. And there are a couple of ways that we do this. So the first is just defining forage fish and having it as, defining it in the law so its importance is understood and widely promoted. And then when setting catch limits for already managed forage species, fishery managers will need to account for the needs of predators. So they'll take into account the science that says that, seabirds and whales and dolphins all need forage fish to survive. So we should keep a portion of that amount of fish in the water so we can have a booming ecosystem. And lastly, there are a lot of unmanaged forage species across the country. So the difference between managed and unmanaged is that with unmanaged, fishing groups can take as many of those species out of the ocean as they want. There's no checks, there's no fines or anything for overfishing of those species. So we are, the language says that for each council, they have to designate a list of unmanaged forage species, and any new directed fishing is stopped until the science is done to show that that fish needs a fishery management plan or can be fished and isn't important for the ecosystem. So it's basically taking forage fish and including it into the law in a very science-based way that we think would help the entire marine ecosystem thrive. And this is also really important for coastal economies. So in 2017, NOAA reported, or the National Oceanic and Administration, reported that about out of the 2.5 billion that was made from fishing ocean fish, 2 billion was actually made off of fish that eat forage fish. So that's a pretty big number. And additionally, forage fish also contribute to the $80 billion that wildlife watchers, including $14.9 billion from bird watchers, spend every year. And that's according to the Fish and Wildlife Service. Next slide, please. Okay, so there are a lot of ways that you can actually help protect forage fish. And if there are, lobbying restrictions, I think it's just important to get the word out that forage fish are important for the marine ecosystem. It's really great to educate members of Congress and the community on the importance of forage fish because it's overlooked. You don't really even need to mention a bill in your meeting or letters to the editor. But if you can lobby, that would also be really great. But so the ways you can get the word out are meeting with your member of Congress. And like Tom said before, a lot of the members will be in district in August. So that's a really good time to meet with them about various issues, as well as just getting the word out in general. So LTs and op-eds in local newspapers, tell a friend, tell your family, post on social media, and you can always incorporate the importance of forage fish into zoo and aquarium demonstrations. And we have a ton of different templates for letters to the editor, op-eds, and social media. So my contact information will be on the last slide of my presentation. And please feel free to reach out, and I can work with you to help you with a lot of this work.
And Charlotte, I'll just add, I know there are not only Audubon, but there are plenty of others who can offer the same assistance. So the help is out there and it's not hard to find. Do you want me to go to the next?
Yes, please. And legislators really want to hear from constituents. So there's a ton of data that says that just a DC lobbyist can't really have a ton of influence. 94% of congressional staff actually say that constituent meetings have some or a lot of influence on an undecided congressperson. And 64% of those offices actually prefer constituent meetings, while only 7% prefer a DC lobbyist. So members are more likely to act when they know constituents care, and that's where you come in, because a lot of fisheries management actually impacts many coastal areas, and for seabirds, it actually can relate to inland areas, because many seabirds are migrating across the country and stop over in places like the Great Lakes, but they need enough ocean fish to go from one point to the next. So a lot of birders care about this issue, because many seabirds that they see in their town may actually not get there without the ocean fish. Next slide, please. And so this slide just explains what's happening with the Forage Fish Conservation Act. So we're hoping that in August, the bill will get a hearing. And like Tom mentioned before, Representative Huffman is doing listening sessions. So we hope that forage fish is an issue that comes up during those listening sessions. Representative Huffman is a co-sponsor of the Forage Fish Conservation Act, so he is supportive. And then we're hoping it will get a markup where different members can add amendments to the bill and make changes, and then it will pass through that specific committee. And then, so that's just a handful of House members, and then it'll go to a floor vote. So that will be the full House and hopefully pass through the House. And then at the same time, the Senate could take up the bill at any point and go through the same process. And we're hoping it gets introduced in a bipartisan way pretty soon. And then once, I have if on the slide, but I'm hopeful it will pass. Once both bills pass, it will go to the president to become a law. Next slide, please.
So if there are any questions, and I'm having computer issues, so I can't see them. Bill, if there are any questions that people have asked, I know someone asked about the Democratic co-sponsor of the Young bill, and it's Jeff Van Drew, who's a freshman Democrat, who I think's from a kind of tough district on these issues. He is the Democratic co-sponsor. Are there any other questions?
Not yet at this time.
Okay. So the one thing I'll add to what Charlotte was just saying, to go back to this slide a little bit, I'm a former congressional staffer, and this slide is 100% true. It's DC lobbyist, and which I've also been one of. You're in there, all the time, and you don't really have any skin in the game for those members unless you're writing them big checks. But the people they have to listen to are constituents. And when constituents make an effort to come to Washington, D.C., and it is an effort, as many of you know, that you pay special attention to that, and you're going to listen a little bit about it, because you're going to be able to explain it from a local angle that a lobbyist like me may not be able to do, certainly can't contextualize it for everyday life in those communities. So this is really important, and I'm going to pick up on that right here, and to basically let you know, if you didn't already know, you guys are very important constituents for a couple of reasons. And there's a lot of research out here on this sort of stuff, but the general museum category, which includes zoos and aquariums and science museums and art museums, 75% of the public trust what they hear from you when you're talking. And it's in-house communications, external communications, wherever it's done, they put a lot of value in it. And they also view you as one of the least politically motivated messengers out there, a lot more credible than newspapers and government, certainly politicians, et cetera. So you're trusted and you're believed to be politically neutral, which gives you a lot of stature. What you also know is you host thousands to millions of their constituents every year, which is important, especially since those visitors tend to vote in greater percentages. And I hope this comes out more clearly, but if you see in 2016, national voter turnout was 56%. 70% of people who had visited a museum within the previous 12 months voted. I don't have that number for 2018, but the same survey asked people, would they vote? And it was 62.5% for a midterm election. The voter turnout was 47%. So what that means is your visitors are going to vote, and they're going to, what you tell them is going to make a difference in how they process information on issues which could impact candidates. And that, I like to joke that an informed and educated voter is a politician's worst nightmare. So how can you utilize your leverage on this? And there's a few message points that I think always need to be put in. First of all, as I mentioned, not only do you host thousands to millions of people every year, your jobs aren't going anywhere. You're anchored to your community. Your economic impact is significant, jobs, vendors, etc. And no other community is going to, the Toledo Zoo is not going to relocate to Birmingham, Alabama, right? It's not one of those issues. Those jobs are going to be there, and you're permanent. Your directors, vice presidents, board members, you're all community leaders. You have connections throughout the community, and that makes a difference in terms of where and when you can deliver messages. Everything you do with kids on informal science education, whether it's a yellow bus field trip, a camp, something that's out in the community, that all broadens your brand and your impact. And then finally, your science-based institutions, and that gets back to your credibility and your lack of a political agenda. When you speak, I've not met a zoo or an aquarium that takes a shortcut on a science issue when they speak about an issue. They basically make sure what they're saying squares with science, and that really, really helps drive views on Capitol Hill and public opinion for that matter. So Charlotte mentioned about, if you can lobby, municipal institutions have restrictions against that, but if you're a 501c3 or a for-profit company, you can lobby legally. You can do it. And so I want to make sure we make that point. I usually put a slide in to talk about this, but lobbying basically is getting somebody else or yourself to make a direct ask to somebody about a specific legislative issue. So for instance, if you talked about HR 2236 and you want somebody to support it or oppose it, that's the forage fish bill, that's lobbying, okay? But if you talk to them about how important forage fish are to the environment, to the food chain, to the economy, and we need to do more to help forage fish survive, that's not lobbying, that's education. And that's the sort of work and messaging that happens in all of these bullet points at zoos and aquariums. And this list is, could be twice as long. So to give you the idea of whether it's forage fish, and I think it's a great issue because it cuts across, the animals that you have at your institutions, whether they're shorebirds, whether they're marine mammals, whatever. You guys are using forage fish to feed your animals every day, and it's a great messaging opportunity, and you can do it in an educational, non-lobbying way throughout all of these mechanisms. And the importance of that is that builds a constituency. So you may be an institution that lobbying is really tough in your area on environmental issues because it's pretty conservative, it's pretty pro-industry, it's pretty, in that category. But if you just talk about the issues in a neutral way, you're educating people, and then you can let folks like Charlotte, Audubon, and their colleagues come in and do the actual lifting on lobbying, and all you've done is educated the public about an issue, which is a great place to be. And it's how you can work on policy issues without getting into the nuts and bolts of lobby law. So the last thing I want to talk about here is this is something that doesn't need to be reinvented. I pulled these posters down off the internet in about 10 minutes, and these are all educational issue pieces. with the exception of World Oceans Day, which we talked about events earlier a little bit, and you can build this content into them. And so I know a lot of the national groups, environmental groups, do these sorts of infographics, but what you have that they don't have are these thousands and millions of people coming through your institutions, logging online, looking at your stuff. So there's a great opportunity to use this type of stuff on forage fish, which I think is a really sleeper issue that has a huge conservation impact. And it's a type of thing that, you know, think about palm oil, what a lot of zoos and aquariums have done on that. On some of these issues here, you can take a sort of below the radar issue and really elevate it and help drive it and make change through these sorts of resources. So I know I promised 1:30. I'm, I think, a minute or so late on that. So that is the presentation today. We obviously will stick around and answer questions that you have. And I should also note that very shortly, a PDF version of these slides will be up on the Ocean Project's website. And we will have a recording up of this webinar within the next day or so. So please encourage anyone that you think might be interested in it to tune in. So Bill, I'll pause there and answer any questions we might have. Okay. Well, again, thank you all for joining us. That is all we have today. And we hope we'll see you guys on August 2nd for our next webinar.